In this video, we'll be reviewing the pan, tilt, zoom, and digital controls for any camera connected to your Sentry VMS system. First, let's log into our client. And let's pick a PTZ camera. Here we have an exterior camera with full PTZ control. And in the lower left corner of your screen, as you see me circling with the cursor, are all the PTZ controls we use with this particular camera and with most cameras. We have left, right, up, down, diagonal, home button. The top two controls here are for zooming in and out. The middle two are for focusing near and far. And the bottom two, depending on the camera, if it supports it, will allow you to open and close the shutter, changing the amount of light that gets in to the camera itself. This last control, this vertical slider, is called speed. That will determine the speed at which the camera reacts when you hit one of these controls. I'll demonstrate that shortly. One other thing to note is that we have this arrow here, which is called pop-out. By clicking on this, we get a full set of PTZ controls in a pop-out window. This can be moved around. You can move this to a second monitor if you like, or you want to move it down to the bottom of the screen. You have complete flexibility as to what you wish to do here. It also gives you the option of selecting a different server, different cameras, popping open a live window of that same camera that you're looking at, same PTZ and focus and zoom controls, the speed control, and the presets that are already set up in the camera. So let's start with zoom. I'm going to click on the zoom in button, which is shown by a plus sign. As you can see, the camera reacts by zooming in to the image that it's pointing at. The zoom out or minus button will reverse that, bring the camera back to a normal view. The focus near and focus far are used when you are zoomed in on a particular scene. So here, if I change the focus, you can see it starts to get blurry, and I can change it back to sharp simply by clicking the other control. But if I go too far, as you can see, this gets blurry real fast. Some cameras are more sensitive to this. It also depends on the level of zoom. The more you are zoomed into a scene, the more sensitive this control becomes. But simply by clicking the appropriate control, you can clear up that focus and make a very sharp image, like that. Okay, let's zoom back out again. The open shutter and close shutter, depending on the camera, as I mentioned earlier, will determine the amount of light that gets into the camera itself. Some cameras will show a brightness display on the screen with a range of anywhere from, let's say, 0 to 100 is normally the scale. And depending on whether you open or close the shutter will determine what that number shows and how much light actually gets into the camera itself. So let's start with the PTZ controls. Here I can go right, left. I can tilt up, tilt down, tilt diagonally. There are 4 diagonal controls here. It gives me pretty good flexibility as to where I want to point this camera and what I want to see within the visual field that that camera is able to display. Okay, speed. I mentioned this control earlier. By changing this slider, you can change how fast the camera will react and how far it will go depending on the control you're hitting. So for example, if I push this all the way up to the top on the plus side and I hit my pan right control, this camera will move very, very quickly to the right. If I click the left control, you'll see it moves very, very fast that way. If, however, I bring it down all the way to the minus sign and do the exact same thing, that's the speed at which the camera will react. Now, that's very good for very fine control when you have to be very accurate in placing the camera. However, if you need to swing all the way to the right at this speed, it could take a very long time. So be aware that this slider controls how much and how fast the camera will react to the particular control that you're using. Okay, down on the bottom we have 2 checkboxes. One is called Joystick PTZ. That's if you're actually using a joystick plugged into a USB port, for example. You can gain control of that camera simply by moving the joystick around. Any game controller or anything else that can be used as a generic joystick will work fine in this instance. Digital PTZ will allow the simulation of pan, tilt, and zoom functions for those cameras that don't have real PTZ controls or optical zooming. So on this camera, I can actually engage the digital PTZ simply by checking that box. And as you noticed before, when I zoomed in and out, the image was pretty clear all the way through. Digital, not so much, but digital also operates in a slightly different way. When I click on zoom in, for example, as you can see, the image jumps, and it's a little bit more grainy than it would be if it was completely normal. But it does give the option to focus in on there for cameras which don't have zoom capability. Let's switch to another camera to demonstrate that further. Here's a static image inside a garage where the camera itself is not a PTZ camera. So none of these controls that I'm clicking on will have any effect on the camera itself. However, if I click on Digital PTZ, I can actually move this camera simply by zooming in on a particular image. So I'm zooming in on the image. Now I want to go left. So notice now I can pan left and pan right in a zoomed in image, even though this is not a PTZ camera. Now granted, this image is a bit fuzzy because it's using digital zoom techniques in order to fill the pixels in and to make the image seem bigger than it is. However, it is an option for those cameras that are fixed without any zoom control to give you at least a bit more of a close-up of a particular scene that you're looking at. So let's zoom in a little more, and you can see I have more ability to move this camera image around based on the PTZ controls that I'm using. Okay, let's try one more just to demonstrate this a little further. Again, this camera is not a PTZ camera, it's a fixed camera. However, the digital PTZ checkbox has already been checked because the software recognizes that this camera supports digital PTZ controls. So simply by zooming in on the particular view I'm looking at, I can engage the PTZ controls and move the image, not the camera, but the image diagonally, panning left and right, tilting up and down. And I can also zoom in even further on the image if need be. Okay, so let's go back to our original parking lot PTZ camera. And let me show you the difference between digital versus optical zoom. I'm going to focus in on that stop sign. It's at the corner of this block. Let's move this camera over just a little bit. That's a little too much. There we go. As you can see, as I'm zooming in, I can change where the target image is in the center of the camera's viewing angle. Now, notice I've zoomed in pretty far, and this is a little bit out of focus. So what I'm going to do is click on my focus controls. There we go, to get that into a nice sharp focus. Okay, so let me zoom out. And let's do this again. I'm going to zoom in. And you can see that's pretty clear. You can make out a street sign, see it's a stop sign. Okay, let's go back to our normal view image. Now let's turn on the digital PTZ control for this camera. I'm going to do the same exact thing digitally. Notice the difference in the displayed image. Okay, I am at the same point now as I was when I was doing this optically. You'll notice this is nowhere near as good of an image, but it does prove the point that digital zooming can be a viable option if you're just looking to zoom in on any part of the image to see if there's any movement or any activity. Let's uncheck digital PTZ, and we'll show this one more time. All right, there's optical zoom, which obviously is much clearer and much better. So the preference would obviously be for optical zooming if the camera supports it. If not, you could always use digital zooming and digital PTZ controlling in order to get different views of the same image in what the camera can see. And that's an overview of our pan, tilt, zoom, and digital options for the Sentry VMS software. You can find more information and you can learn more about us at ipvideocorp.com. Thanks for watching.